This is part of the outtakes.
All right. Welcome to another invigorating edition of Product Coffee, where we brew up the finest blend of product management insights. I'm your host, and today we've assembled a panel that's richer than a double espresso and guaranteed to keep you buzzing. Let's meet our first cup panelists. First up, he's got the agility of a ninja and the roadmap vision of Nostradamus. He shipped more products than FedEx and increased NPS scores like it's an Olympic sport. He's French, which means he delivers product management with style and strategy. And he probably knows more about AI than your favorite sci-fi film. Put your hands together for Danielle Chetrit. Welcome. All right. And now this guy has been in the game so long, he's probably written half the playbook. He's the Yoda of product leadership, mentoring PMs, scaling teams, and tuning market insights into revenue faster than you can say go-to-market strategy. If you've got a product problem, chances are he's already solved it. Give it up for Jerry Odenwelder. Yeah, wait, we got that. There we go. He's a man who saw the future of digital experience before the rest of us even figured out how to spell UX. Back in 2005, he set out to build the ideal workplace, one that believed in the power of design, emerging tech, and, actual people. Fast forward, and his company Toolbox Number 9 has crafted digital experiences for some of the biggest brands on the planet. Disney, Cartoon Network, Coca-Cola. Yeah, no big deal. But here's the real kicker. He's worked with over 100 product and marketing teams, analyzed the top 25 success stories, and distilled their secrets into a roadmap that'll take your strategy from maybe to money in just 99 days. And we're going to hit that later on this morning. Welcome, Jason Rhodes from Toolbox Number 9.
Thank you.
And last but not least, she started her career on the front lines answering customer calls, then worked her way up to product leadership like a boss. She's got the heart of a strategist, the mind of an economist, the rhythm of a dancer. Seriously, she takes dance classes on the weekend. When she's not shaping the future of AR tech at Paylocity, she's probably out there proving that, yes, you can't have a bad day in polka dots. Welcome, Anna McFarland.
Good morning.
All right, good morning. So grab your mugs, let's settle in, and let's percolate some profound product perspectives. All right, that's silly enough for you. Let's get to it. So today, where's that little intro that I had here? AI is eating the world, but if the UX is bad, is anybody coming to the table? In the article, AI Needs Better UX, Christopher Steinlener breaks down why even the smartest AI won't succeed if users can't actually use it. The key, better design, better experience, and making AI work for people, not against them. So since Jerry sent me this article and said we need to let's talk about this, I'm going to let you kick off our discussion and tell us where your thoughts are on this topic.
Yeah, the thing that really stood out to me on this, Jason, the reason that I was like, hey, this would be a great one for First Cup is I was amazed at how far right Christopher put LLMs on his Wordly map. That was the first thing that jumped out to me when I was reading it. Because if you with all of the news and all of the hype and all of the information flow we receive around this, I might have put it a little bit further left. But he goes on to give some pretty interesting insight down there about how in the early days of computing, which you and I were old enough to remember. I don't know if anybody else here
Definitely
was.
not.
And definitely not Anna. You had a flashing prompt, which is essentially what most AI is today. If you didn't know the command, if you didn't know how to get the machine to do what you wanted it to do, you were kind of stuck at that flashing prompt. And a lot of LLMs are still like that. As you know, I've gone through a couple of different providers, OpenAI, U.com, Perplexity, and there are a lot of them are the same. So it really is like if you could provide a better UI for prompting, then I think that would be the next innovative step. I talked way too much there. I'm sorry.
No,
everybody.
you're good. So a better UI for prompting is important in your view. You think that's going to be critical?
just a better UI in general. And I mean, it's all about prompting, but like thinking about the problem that we need to solve, what would be the right UI for that?
All right, cool. Um, Danielle, let's bring you to the table.
Sure.
What was your take?
All right. So besides learning what a worldly map was, thanks to this article, thank you for learning about that. What really resonated with me is that AI needs to meet the user where they are, especially in high-stakes environment. And in my experience, leading a portfolio of products for airport operations, even the best model would fall short if the UX, doesn't enable fast and confident decision making, right? Operational teams on the ground, being like baggage handler or station manager, don't have the time to interpret black box output, which is what LLMs is producing generally. They need clarity. And as Jason will probably mention, visual cues, that they can trust and actionable insights, and they need that fast, really. So otherwise, you can imagine that bags could start piling up, and passenger would be, queuing in front of airline agents, usually starting being, agitated and angry. So good UX for AI features in airport operation, it's not about fancy design. It's about helping users make faster and better decisions. So even small things like showing what's most urgent or the level of confidence of the system, just showing you the action to take, can really improve the trust and the adoption of your product, right? So it's true that the best AI doesn't replace human expertise, it enhances it. And the success using AI in a UI application will come when AI fits naturally the user workflows, right? So lastly, I believe that the great AI UX will only happen when the product, design, data, and the DevOps team, start collaborating together from day one, using an LLM ops feedback loop, so that you can actually just benefit from the entire experience, not just wrapping a UI on top of a model after the fact. So that would be my recommendation as a product strategy there.
One of the things that you called out there is that really interests me is the notion of AI in the entire user workflow, and that immediately screamed to me bigger than just the on-screen workflow, the in-system workflow, but the jobs to be done workflow,
Getting back to
the
last
whole
week.
experience, and I think that's a really interesting ball to keep the eye on as well. Is how does AI let us extract the interface of the system away from the screen or from the device that we're dependent upon. Anna, what say you?
So I think I have a different take,
Yeah?
I would say. And I'm a big fan of a better UX always, right? Like it's key for the user experience. But my take on this is that we don't need a better UX for AI and prompting. In my vision, we don't need a UX at all. So it's like when I think of AI, it's more like what's in the background behind the actual product. So rather than needing a prompt to do something, just the act of like going to where you're going and doing what you're doing, the AI should automatically generate what you're going there to do, or it should already be happening and you're just going to the end of the process to approve it or to tweak it, right? So you shouldn't even need the prompt. So like an example that I think of with my product is we create HR software and we have a performance review module, right? And as a manager, you have to do performance reviews for your employees. And so when I think about as a manager, what would be really cool is if I open up an employee's performance review and it's already written for me, like literally already written for me, because the AI has pulled in all of the data throughout the HRIS, the recognition the person's received, the work the person's done, the accolades, the goals they've missed or hit, brings it into the review, writes the review for me. And all I do as the manager is go in, kind of check it out, see if I agree with it, maybe make some tweaks, things like that. So it's like, it's not that there's a new UX or a better UX. It's like there's no UX that's like specific to the AI. It's just there.
The document has been
That's cool.
created.
Yeah.
You didn't go ask it.
You didn't ask it.
You didn't have an interface.
Yeah.
This is the day that we do this. So here's
Exactly.
the thing that you need to review and improve and approve, and you're done.
Right. Similar like
I love that use
payroll
case.
day, payday comes, payroll just runs, errors happen. The AI fixes the errors for you. You don't even have to go in. It knows how to fix it because it's learned over the past 3 years of the payroll that you run how to fix those errors, right? So just like it does everything for you without you even having to be involved. That's what I think is the right user experience and hopefully the future.
Yep, I like it. I think we're in a lot of alignment there. I didn't give you the article in advance, Jason, but I think it's a topic that you've given a lot of thought to.
Sure, I love this topic.
Yeah,
I love
so-
walking into this conversation.
Yeah,
Right.
so welcome to pivoting.
Yeah, right.
So the journal article was the author built out a Wardley map.
Yeah.
And for those who aren't familiar with Wardley maps, you can read the article, and there's a little bit of a reason why he used them. And Kelly's going to drop in the notes here in a few minutes. I had Grok put together a lesson on Wardley maps for me last night. Just similarly, I was aware of them, but not super familiar with them, and it did a great job. And so I'm just going to give that to Kelly. I think I actually already gave it to Kelly, and she's going to paste it into the show notes for today, so you can kind of read that. And we might do a session on that later. But essentially, what a Wardley map does is it starts with the user at the top, and then diagrams the experience and all the components of the experience down all the way down to as far away from the user as is necessary to complete the experience. And then on a left to right basis, it starts with what is the most innovative technology on the left, and then as you move to the right, you get to more commoditized technologies or components of it. So you can kind of see where the real opportunities for innovation are throughout the entire value chain. It's a really cool idea. It's a really cool tool. But he took a Wardley map and he mapped out where we are with the state of generative AI today. He proposed a couple of things. He said, in addition to power and compute, another thing that is already at the commodity stage, he posited, was LLMs are a commodity already. I don't know that I fully agree with that. I see his reasoning and his rationale, but he was really spent a good deal of the article talking about why we need new UX paradigms to support this emerging generative AI. And that was kind of the overall thesis, is the old paradigms don't work anymore. We need to come up with new user experience concepts, user experience paradigms in order to deliver great products that are powered by generative AI. So with that little bit of a tee up,
Yeah.
what do you think real quick?
Lots to say on that. And just to play off that, one phrase we use a lot in the UX world is when people ask, what application has the best UX, or what's the best UX you've seen? One of my lead designers always says, the best UX is the UX you don't see. So take a car from the 70s. My first car was a 240 Datsun Z, stick shift, clutch. And now if in an electric car...
Yeah, you started hot.
Now in an electric car, I have a one button to turn it on, don't even use a brake, right? You know, it's just so much simpler. I don't even see how the mechanics behind it. So I suspect all UX kind of follows the path of simplicity and invisibility, maybe. But the thing that's floating through my mind is, whose job is it? And maybe this is what you were getting at, to actually create these new paradigms. And I'm not sure if this is the premise of the article, but what I was inferring is, like, is it the LLM's job? Is it OpenAI's job? Is it Grok's job to create these new paradigms? Or is it more of like an AWS model where, like, hey, we're providing you these API endpoints. And the end of the day, it is the industry's job to come up with these new paradigms. It's the end product's job to do that. So I would agree, of course, we're going to see a huge advancement in UX and how we interact with LLM. But blockchain, is there a UX for blockchain?
No.
Maybe, you could argue that I go to Coinbase and I'm interacting, and that's my UX for a blockchain feature. So I think it's probably the responsibility is going to fall more on product design and companies that are using those API tools to accomplish their goals.
Yeah, I'm there with you, and Anna as well. I tend to look a lot further into the future when I'm thinking about these things as well. I think of short-term problems and long-term problems. And from a near-term problem, one of the things that the author was talking about is like, we're kind of like back in DOS world. And Jerry mentioned that as well. We're kind of back in DOS world where everything is a command prompt or you're just typing with an interface. You're using natural language though, and that's a very natural experience. A lot of the consumer-focused and user-focused LLM products that are out there right now are starting to offer voice interfaces as well, which has its pluses and minuses. It's really convenient and easy when it works really well. However, when you're sitting in an office with 30 other people, using a voice interface is not necessarily so convenient. But and Elon Musk has commented a few times that some of the things that they're doing with Neuralink, the company, one of the companies in his portfolio, is they're recognizing that as we continue to progress in AI, the only way we're going to be able to keep up and accurately interface with AI-powered systems, he has suggested, is going to be through a literal neural link to be able to actually communicate in real time with the fastest possible interface with a computer. I am an early adopter of many technologies. Not that one. Not for me, thanks. But I think it's a fascinating concept because then it gets into the best UX is no UX, or is there a UX? How do you think about a paradigm where, to your point, the information and the processing is just there. It knows when to act, and it's just seeking confirmation and amending the work that you're already doing. So, does UX, as we know it today, where we're thinking about a graphical experience, a physical, an interactive experience on a screen, or even in a augmented reality fashion, does that continue to be important? Does it drift away? Do the skill sets required for UX in product drastically change overall? Is it more than a new paradigm?
You want the sci-fi answer or the practical answer?
I think there's the 2-year, the 5-year, and the 20-year answer.
Let's go 15 years.
Okay.
Probably not. Probably 5 years. What tools do users have today? They have their finger, the ability to swipe on mobile devices, a mouse cursor. What's not there? Like facial expressions, eye contact, your eyebrows. The nuances that we have as humans. Tone of voice, yeah. Mm-hmm. The nuances that we have as humans right here, that's currently not available to your to interacting with whatever LLM. So like maybe a little far out, but do that. But in the meantime, yeah, there has to be some stepping stones for sure. And I think voice is compelling for sure. I think predictive input is extremely compelling. But I think in those stepping stones, so for sure, design UX is going to evolve, but it's probably going to follow the same patterns we've already seen with other technologies.
And I think there definitely will be new skills needed. I mean, that's kind of a given. I like what the author said in the article about how it used to be that they would say all product people need to know how to code. Mm-hmm. And now they're saying all product people need to know how to write prompts, but that's not really true, or it's not going to be true, right?
It's a temporary state.
It is. And I kind of thought that was an interesting point, but I do think that as product and UX people, we're going to have to learn new skills.
Mm. Yeah. Danielle.
And it also reminds me of what Mark Zuckerberg, has said recently. I don't know if you pay attention to Meta and Google talking again about using the smart glasses or future augmented reality, right? And so there will be really there is huge amount of investment as a new human, computer interface here, not just like you said with the smartphone, so that thanks to the glasses, they will be able to actually see what we see as human and try to interpret much faster than we can, thanks to actually all those LLMs behind the scene, and be able to react and then predict what you should do as an action yourself. So I think that that will be also something to pay attention, in the future, not just designing for the computer or smartphone, but also for those new devices that will be flooded, in the market.
I have a paradigm that I think is one of the first things to consider with new UX. This whole idea of options we were talking about before. So if you're using Midjourney, you put in a prompt, you get 4 visual options. Now in ChatGPT, periodically asks me, it provides 2 options, asks me which one's the favorite. So that's for sure useful to a user, because there's no way an LLM is going to ever predict with 100% certainty what the user wants. I think that's probably one of the first things to explore is how do you triage these results that an LLM is providing, right? So that might be something worth exploring. So if you can imagine these flowcharts or trees, like I think that's probably one of the most compelling things that should be worked on immediately. We're like, hey, we have options now. Before it used to be like, we're going to give you one answer and it's going to be as close as possible. Now they're going to be ranked or ordered or visualized in some capacity. I think that's going to be fascinating.
And how do you do that efficiently and effectively so that you don't get bogged down with the paradox of choice? So that's a great call out. Really,
we call it incremental engagement. What's that little nugget?
Yeah.
You can get just their interest and then incrementally engage them into the content.
So I guess what I'm hearing is that the Christopher in that article was on the right path, right? I mean, if we think about the UX, whether it's the no UX or voice or predictive, it is in that usability experience where there's the cat where we need to
Nice.
where there's opportunity for innovation. And I love the call out that it's really us as product people building our products where there's opportunity for that innovation to happen. We shouldn't be looking to the Perplexities and the OpenAIs of the world to innovate there. That is our spot where we can actually be really innovative with it. So, and it makes me think of some of the stuff. I wish Misha had been able to join us this morning. Some of the stuff he's doing over at PromptOwl, with pulling things together with a different user experience.
Yep,
Anyway.
absolutely. I think would have loved to have had him here today. I know he's hard down in the weeds in product launches. So we'll try to get him back on here real soon too to talk about that. Thanks everybody. I want to give thanks to our first cup panel. This has been a great discussion. We got started a little bit late this morning, so we don't have usually for those of you who are new, we take a few minutes to do some introductions and have a little bit of networking conversation, but we got started a little bit late today. I do want to real quickly give a shout out and a special welcome to Rich, Ashley, Vanessa, Danielle, I can't pronounce your last name, but not Danielle, who is sitting right here. Danielle, who is on the Zoom call or on LinkedIn. I want to thank you for joining us for the first time here today. And everybody, we got a lot of folks here out on the Zoom call. Let's get going right now, though. We have got a great topic today, and I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to finish it. So before we do that, I want to take care of a little bit of housekeeping, though. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to drop in, and I want to give thanks to all of our sponsors. We do Product Coffee here every week, and it would not be possible without all these amazing sponsors that you see on your screen right now. Kelly's dropping a list of sponsors and links in the chat right now. You can, what we ask you to do to support those sponsors is just get to know them a little bit, understand how how they might be able to help your company or your colleagues, someone in your network. And if you have an opportunity to introduce them so that they can compete for someone's business, please do so. We also have quite a few sponsors like Prize Picks, Genuine Parts Company, Go-To Foods, who are looking to recruit high quality product people to join their teams. And we got information about that in the chat as well. Follow through on those links, get to know those companies if you're looking for a new role. There, I know we've been having some really deep conversations with Prize Picks lately, and they've got a whole bunch of new roles that are opening up very soon. So stay tuned for those. But thanks to all those sponsors for making this possible every week. Support them by learning about them and referring them when you have an opportunity to do so. All right, next week. We have got, just like this week, we started out next week's session with an article that we were planning for the first cup, and it got really big and really exciting. So we have got an amazing roundtable next week on product thinking in IT. And I've been hearing from a lot of you that we've got a lot of folks in our community who are product managers or have been made into product managers working in a traditional CIO IT organization and trying to bring product habits, product thinking into those organizations. And that brings its own set of challenges. And we're going to talk about that really deeply next week. We're going to have our friend Allison here in the studio with us next week, as well as Nandu in the studio. We'll also have Jerry and Scott on the Zoom with us as well for that roundtable. It's going to be a great conversation. And we've got a separate first cup for that day that'll go really well with it, so you won't want to miss it. That's going to be at 11:30, not until noon. We'll go 11:30 to 1 next week. That's Eastern Daylight Time. So we'll see you soon for that. And I want to show this first. Let's go back to live. There we go. So if this is your first time at Product Coffee, one of the things that we do is we take notes as a community. And this is part of how we just work together to help strengthen each other. So as you hear something today that you want to capture, just take a quick moment and jot it down in our community notes document at productcoffee.com/notes. You can save that to your own Google Drive, star it. It'll be there forever. We keep those around forever. And you'll be able to come back to it. And if you contribute to the notes, please drop in your LinkedIn profile information. One of our most prolific contributors is sitting here at the table with me today, so you're gonna not be able to rely on Danielle today. But we work together to add insights through that written format as well. We'll see you there in the notes document. All right, so now, close that down. Let's get started with today's session. I introduced him before, but I want to welcome back Jason Rhodes. He's a man who saw the future of digital experience before the rest of us even figured out how to spell UX. Back in 2005, he set out to build the ideal workplace, one that believed in the power of design, emerging tech, and actual people. Fast forward, and his company, Toolbox Number 9, has crafted digital experiences for some of the biggest brands on the planet. Disney, Cartoon Network, Coca-Cola. Yeah, none of those are any big deal. But here's the real kicker. Jason has worked with over 100 product and marketing teams, analyzed the top 25 success stories, and distilled their secrets into a roadmap that will take your product from maybe to money in just 99 days. That's right. He's handing you the blueprint to not be one of those companies that crashes and burns before the second round of funding. What do you think of that, Jason? So we're going to get started here now with and take us on an expedition into expedition number 9. And let me get this slides up here.
I wanted to give this talk a sexy title, so soon will be revealed. But yeah, thanks you, Jason, and thanks for bringing up this slide. I would love to keep talking about the UX of AI, but we'll stay on topic here and share my knowledge. As Jason said, I've worked with over 100 companies directly, and I should say 100 teams, and every single digital product. It's funny, earlier in this call, somebody mentioned DOS prompts. I remember the first time I saw a DOS prompt. I don't remember the exact year, but I know it was the same year Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles first came on TV, because I was at my friend's house and he showed me his IBM 286 and he showed me a DOS prompt. I'd never seen one. And he showed me how you could change its color. It could go from like white to green to blue, and it literally blew my mind. So that was my first foray into attractive digital experiences, and ever since then, we've been creating user experiences for various products and websites. So is the deck on? Sorry.
There you are.
Okay.
Let me share it to Zoom here.
So I'll start with a little bit of a story. I went to Antarctica with my wife, and the observation room, they have this book called The Endurance. If you've never read it, it's about this man, Shackleton. Have you read this?
No.
Okay, cool. Well, we're gonna take a little voyage here. Ernest Shackleton. Should I just tell you the next slide?
Yep.
This real hero. He was a really inspirational entrepreneur. He was a famed explorer. Amazing story. But spoiler alert, we go to the next slide, we'll see that this voyage to the South Pole just ended with total disaster. He eventually had to abandon his ship because it was crushed by ice. I think they had to eat their dogs to survive. Him and his team lived in freezing cold for months, but they did make it all out alive. And hearing that story reminded me a lot of startup stories. A lot of heroic rescues. Most don't survive. They have cool adventure stories. But in the end of the day, there's heroes that get them through that if they even make it. But contrast that with, I believe it was a Dutch explorer named Amundsen. And Amundsen was actually the first to reach the South Pole. And his approach was very, very different. He actually spent a year living with the Inuits. He learned how they survived without heavy gear. He ran a lot of test expeditions in the Arctic before going to the Antarctic. He took a very, very lightweight approach. He reached the pole in 99 days, and he returned safely home. Everything went as planned. And he has a really good quote. He's like, "Victory awaits who has everything in order." People call it luck. Adventure is just bad planning. So I feel like a lot of product expeditions are more adventures than they are like Shackleton, than they are like Amundsen. So why am I telling you this story? Well, if the metaphor isn't totally blatantly obvious, we see a lot of failures in not just the startup space, but the enterprise space as well. Whether these stats are real or not, I think we can all agree that like most startups don't survive, and only 10% supposedly survive more than 3 years. But even on the enterprise, an enterprise has everything going for it. They already have a locked-in audience. They have budget. They have teams. Yet 50% surveys say to deliver 56, half the value as expected. So I think we all need to go into these product expeditions knowing that chances of failure are very, very high. So we worked with a lot of teams, as I've said before, and we've been extremely lucky to work with mostly successful teams. So when I read these stats, I'm like, that's not our experience. And why is it? I'm like, is it because they work with us? I'd love to take credit for all of our successes, but I think it's just the maturity of the teams that typically choose to work with like a UX UI consultant. They're considering all these other factors. So I went back and looked at all the teams, and I looked at how they approached product, and I've tried to distill it a little oversimplified for the purposes of this talk, but I tried to distill it into this like 9-step program. So this is expedition number 9, and I am saying, just like Amundsen, I think this is a 99-day expedition. Now, in reality, sometimes these expeditions take a full year. Sometimes people try to cram it into 9 days instead of 99, but I think you're going to follow along with that. And obviously, I'd love to hear your guys' point of view because you guys have seen this too as well. So again, what's the approach you want to take? Do you want adventure? You want to make this exciting? You want a high risk, high reward, or do you want victory? So we'll get into it, and we'll see what this actually looks like. Oh, by the way, my credentials I've already mentioned. Thank you very much, Jason. I did found Toolbox in 2005. I started my career about 2000, right at the advent of the web. So I've seen the full progression since then. I created my first piece of digital art in 1989. I still remember what it looked like using ANSI graphics, if that means anything to anyone. I've also been to Antarctica and back and returned safely, so I have some subject matter expertise here. So we're going to fast forward through that. I think I've already covered my credentials, but I will say I went back and I looked at all of our most recent SaaS products, and 81% I would consider successful. They were either profitable, because that was their goal. The startups were series funded or acquired. And again, I'm not taking credit for that. I'm taking credit for being part of a team, a piece of a pie. And you'll even say through these 9 things, we're just one of these 9 things. So what's the main difference? I think the best teams we work with, they really have the patience for upfront planning and discipline to stick to the strategy. So I'm sure you guys have all heard it. There's all high pressure on product teams to rush to market. What is that, LinkedIn? If you're not proud of your first release,
You're not embarrassed by it.
yeah, you've waited too long. Okay, this is a very 1999 mentality, so we'll see how that plays out in the future. And you hear a lot of near-death experiences, even from successful products, right? Everybody has these near deaths. So I'm not saying this is totally unavoidable. It's part of the process. It's part of the adventure. But let's get into it. All right. So here's your strategy, and let's get started with. Well, here's an overview, and I can certainly share this out through the Product Coffee links. I'm going to break it up to basically 4 phases. This is establishing your mission and charter. Next, we want to get into your knowledge gathering and journey mapping. Next are going to be your test expeditions. So like Admundson was running these expeditions in the Arctic. And then ultimately, what's going to make this even possible is fundraising and I would say marketing. And that might be marketing towards internal or external audiences or investors. It all comes down to the product you're creating. All right, your mission charter. It is actually quite rare when we work with a company that has very articulately, I can't even say the word, I can't articulately expressed their mission. And we see this all the time. There might be a dozen people on a product and nobody actually knows what their South Pole is. So the initial recommendation, and everybody has different ways of doing this, whether you're using a tool like AHA for product strategy, but let's keep it simple. I mean, I think most product teams haven't done the bare basics of using something like Lean Canvas to visualize their product. Now, I'm a visual person. I think I have an example here. Yeah, I'm a very visual person. In Lean Canvas, I'm sorry, it's actually this next slide after this. I think Lean Canvas is a really beautiful tool because I think it really distills this down to just one simple page, and that can be easily disseminated. There's plenty of resources online. If we go back to the first one, sorry, I did skip over that. I totally skipped over culture and values. And I'm not just talking about core values that are posted on the wall. Like, really, what is this team or company's ideology? There's a good book and concept by Jim Collins. I believe he wrote Good to Great, called Core Ideology. And it's like, really, what is your North Star as a company? And I would love for all product companies to take the time to really create and disseminate and really, really believe in what they're trying to accomplish, because that's ultimately what everything will go back to. This is what our ethos is as a company. And again, the best product teams we meet with, they have drank the Kool-Aid. They will tell you what they accomplished, how they're improving the world, what their goals are individually and as a team. It's a really beautiful thing. And you see this in the first meeting you have with them. That's all they want to talk about. And then next, the actual clear charter and mission and values. The other best teams that we work with, everybody knows their responsibilities. It's very well documented. There's a lot of different ways to do it. And I think you're either having a session or just had a session on OKRs. Yeah, and I think it was an ethics tie-in to OKRs. So that sounds very fascinating. I haven't seen that yet, so I definitely will go back and watch that because that might even tie that first concept of like your core ideology with your OKRs. So if you're not familiar with OKRs, these are your objectives and key results. It's a fairly simple concept, but again, the best performing teams, everybody knows what their OKRs are, and they probably know their cultural tie-in to those OKRs, and they know how they tie into the greater mission. And again, when we first get exposed to a team, because we get to know them really well, usually the first kickoff meeting, they're like, okay, they get it. They get each other. You're right. And they want to express it. So like Admonson, he spent a lot of time with these Inuits. He's like, how do they survive off the land, essentially, off the animals that are around here? Shackleton brought all of his own gear, went with his own knowledge, didn't really run a lot of tests, or not at least an adequate amount of tests. So I think this is where like CX, and you mentioned jobs to be done earlier on, right? This is like, how do we acquire local knowledge? How can we learn from others? And do we really know? I think a lot of the highest performing teams recognize they don't know what they don't know. They're just very, very upfront about it. And what I love about what like Devin couldn't join us today, having seen him work and how good he is at customer research using this jobs to be done framework, really, really creating those empathy maps, really spending time with the customer, really going deep, asking those questions and pulling it together. And then ultimately, I think the hard part is synthesizing it into something useful that, again, can be disseminated so everybody knows what they're trying to accomplish. So customer research, there's no end to it. It's not going to give you the answer, right? You know, you asked customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? But it will help guide all your decisions moving forward and validating all those assumptions you're making. How am I doing on time?
You're great.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got as much as 40 minutes.
Oh, okay.
But I know we're gonna have some folks with some questions.
Yeah,
and
I tend to be verbose. I just want to be respectful of everybody's time. And thank you very much for everybody who's joined us. When we start getting into like practical UX, even the best teams, I have almost never, I can't remember a time I've seen an amazing journey map, and I love them. I think companies that spend that time to create a visual map, everybody sees it. It's that empathy map. What are their motivators? What are their goals? What are our goals? What are our KPIs that relate to them? What are the metrics? What are our key motivators? And I think a lot of companies forget that as your customers go through their maturity stages with you, their goals change, right? So mapping that out in a journey, there might be better tools. I like this one called uxpressia.com. It's very easy to use, practically free. It's very visual, and it really helps you create this matrix. You can really get into the user. And most enterprise products have multiple users, you know? So there's different dimensions to this matrix. I haven't really come across a lot of teams that have really invested heavily in journey mapping. And I think it's like, I call it like the treasure map. It's like all the answers live within this journey map. And especially when everybody, your development team, your sales team, your marketing team, your product team, your C-level, once everybody's spent time to look through it and everybody really feels like they get the goals that they're trying to accomplish, then I think you can actually start putting pen to paper.
You know, I want to jump in real quick. If you live in the Atlanta area, there's a company based here in Gwinnett County called Booster, and they do school fundraisers basically. And we had Todd Trapp on here a few weeks ago as our guest. The reason I'm telling you all this is they do a monthly series called Virtue Village, where you can actually go out to their office and they have a speaker come in and talk about doing good business. And one of the things that Booster has done is they've done their journey map. And they have taken that journey map that they spent a good deal of time really studying, and it has become not just a printed mural, but they literally had a designer build their journey map on a major wall in their office, so everyone in the company sees this journey map every single day and can get grounded in their contribution in that customer journey.
Beautiful.
It's a really amazing thing to see. If you get a chance to look up Booster and Virtue Village and go out and visit their office and see that, it's really inspiring.
I remember this quite some time, so I'm sure they've upgraded this, but I was a site visit to a major retailer, shall remain nameless, and they had something very similar for their in-store experience. I'm like, oh, great, where's your digital one? Oh, we don't have that. I'm like, what? So even the best companies, highest performing companies, there's big blind spots into that. I love that. And again, if you haven't done this yet, it's fun, right? And a tool like uXpressia, you don't need to hire a designer for. So at this point, I think you're really ready for whatever your test expeditions are. And to oversimplify, and this is where my biases come in from a UX UI perspective, we were talking about earlier. So UX UI is and always will be about user experience, obviously. How do we make the most intuitive, beautiful, minimal experience that most benefits our customers and what they're trying to get done? But what I have found that the value of a UX UI exercise in, say, this expeditions phase isn't so much solving the user's final needs. I think it's preventing you from making crappy decisions. Because when you go through a thorough UX UI prototyping phase, you're just forced to see with reality, with your own eyes, the benefits or the consequences of the assumptions you've made. So the most expensive place to fail is when your product is already in the hands of customers. So expensive. The least expensive place to fail is, say, on a whiteboard, right? Just erase and do it. And the delta between that might be a 10,000x cost, right? Depending on the size of your company. So how do we get closer to the whiteboard? And to me, visual prototyping is probably the next best step. And it just, everybody looks at it. The development team can figure out what the functional requirements are. The product team can figure out how this actually solves customer needs. Sales and marketing team can figure out, like, how are you actually going to put this in front of people? So again, I'm sure everybody here has UX UI team or consultants that work with their product, but I wonder if the mentality is all there. Like, are you hiring graphic designers, which you should, or are you hiring people that are helping you iterate and weed out those bad ideas before we commit to code? And then when we get into code, proof of concept. Now, proof of concept varies based on what you're trying to accomplish. I think there are things that you're either trying to solve from a customer perspective or a functionality perspective, and you really got to dial it in. Like, what's going to be the blocker? And I think what a proof of concept is truly trying to do is convince everybody this is worth spending more money on, right? Like, what's going to kill this project, right? Or what's going to kill this product? And what barriers do we have to get past? I think people get really caught up with creating the MVP before a proof of concept because they're so excited to get their product to market. We'll talk about that next. But I think the discipline to choose, like, what's the killer in this? Like, if this fails, it all fails, right? And that's what we have to prove in this first 99 days. You're obviously not going to create an MVP in 99 days. But if you're not familiar with lean product, this might be a little small for those of you on Zoom, but it's worth looking into. How you think about your MVP is just as important as how you go about creating it. And when I say how you think about it, like, what are you actually trying to accomplish? What's the sliver? Because I think people go very wide on their MVP. They try to solve a lot of things. They don't take that sliver, that one super desirable sliver that they can put in front of internal or external users to actually prove that we're like, hey, is this truly, truly viable? Because we work with a lot of enterprises, we often find ourselves taking this, like, monolithic product that does everything that the roadmap started in 1985 and it became this behemoth. And then someone in the company is like, what if we just took this one sliver and just pulled this off and made this one beautiful, seamless experience? And then you end up creating something that people really, really, really love. So I think so many products that come from an enterprise take that approach. Like, we have the market, we understand it, but have we truly created an MVP that delivers value? From a startup perspective, and you're starting from zero, again, that people tend to start wide. And I think that might just be a product of when you're a startup, you're obviously resource constrained. So the few resources you have in your product are going to be biased on what they do, right? So you don't get that comprehensive view. So this is a big challenge. And I would say of the startups that have been successful, I think the founders have done all the aforementioned, but they just always have that constraint to really narrow it down. Fundraising and storytelling. This is all pointless if somebody's not going to pay for it. I think it was Mark Jensen gave a fantastic talk on financial modeling. I think that was geared towards how to speak to CFOs, but I think that modeling matters to everyone. It's what are all the methods to use to, like, how much is this going to cost? How much money is it going to make? What is the financial impact of this? It's so hard. It's so difficult. You need multiple methodologies to get at a semi-accurate answer, but part of it's just doing your homework, right? Showing the proof and adjusting as needed. I don't think everybody needs a CFO level in-depth review of the finances before they have everything solved. But I think a lot of companies, they look at it very, very broadly. They don't look at it from maybe a feature point of view. They don't look at it from a customer point of view. They don't think of it from a team point of view. They might just be looking at that one. So I think the multi-dimensional fundraising story is really important. And I guess my last thing, the number 9, is the storytelling. I really like the concept of story brand. I would say a pitch deck. I think a lot of internal product managers, especially in enterprise, don't always know how to sell their product internally. They don't know how to sell the idea. I think someone said to me the other day, it was just like, what are the 3 things that really matter? Like, how are you going to make money? How are we going to save time? And how are we going to stay out of jail? So like, he's like, all great internal pitch decks should have this in here. Like, how are you going to stay secure? How are you going to stay compliant? How is this going to generate money? And it needs to be put into a story. And even this talk, as I let in, I'm like, hey, what's the hook? Like, what's the metaphor? What's the analogy? How can you get people to emotionally attach themselves to what you're trying to accomplish here? And I think really good teams bundle all of this together in a very simple, compelling, and I would say the UX of all this is like, hey, it should come across as very minimal. It should come across as very simple. It should come across as fun, you know? It should come across as exciting. So I guess this final pitch deck, when it all kind of comes together, I think that's the final reward. Do they have the visual prototype? Do they have the roadmap? Do they have the strong vision? Have we realigned our OKRs to the goals? So that's expedition expedition number 9. And of course, I have like an appendix with some checklists as we go through.
Very cool. We'll just add a link to this into the archive, which will be out there probably later today.
Great. I think a lot of people are already on their expedition. Very few people are starting at ground zero right now, right? And some people are needing to pivot right now. Maybe some people are being, some stakeholders, some pressure on stakeholders right now to make adjustments to whatever the roadmap is. So if you're already on your expedition, it might be a good time to check yourself. Have we checked all these boxes? Do we have all this aligned? Do we need to rewind and address some of these before we move on? Chances are probably yes. And I don't think it should be a year-long process. I think it should be about a quarter.
So that is pretty quick to actually go to really flesh out everything in a really responsible way. So thanks for sharing this, Jason. So we got some time here, folks. Unlike a lot of podcasts that you may listen to, you're here for it. This is a interactive community meetup. So would love to hear some additional thoughts. If you've got thoughts about what you just heard from Jason and or questions to click deeper into some of the concepts. One of the things that I am specifically interested in hearing a little bit from you about, I think you wrap it up with that need for storytelling and pitching the idea. And I think the feedback that I have heard from a lot of our members and a lot of our audience is even among product people who have been at it for a while, the idea of crafting that pitch that brings it all together and telling that story to get that funding is still a very scary story for a lot of people, no matter where you are in your career. So if you think about the best practices, the companies that you've seen, can you tell us a few stories, a little bit of a click into what works really well, how you've seen people be successful and the impact that that's had?
Specifically on the storytelling?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great question. I think like any marketing job, knowing the audience and really what their primary concerns are. And I outlined are we making money? Are we saving time? Are we reducing risk? To overgeneralize it. We work with a lot of product directors, VPs of products, and actually a lot of CMOs throughout that. And the CMOs have a very different approach, right? They have a little bit more visibility, maybe to what the market's looking for, what type of response. So they can kind of combine their market research into the product roadmap. I think that's extremely valuable. So if there's VPs of products out there and they don't have a really close relationship with the director of marketing, that's probably the first place I would start. They're going to have the insights. They're going to know I even went to a talk. I think it was a marketing conference. I can't remember what it was. And this is like 5 or 6 years ago. And at the time, I think the CIO was kind of dominating the C-level because it was all about cybersecurity. It's like, when are they basically the head of the company, right? They know everything about their customers. They know what they're looking for. When is the CMO brought into the story to how do we define what the product roadmap is? So that's a good place to start for those of you who don't have that really close tie into marketing. I think we live in this kind of cool in-between world of marketing and technology. So often we're in this little Venn diagram. So we hear it from both sides. So I would look at it from that point of view. On the flip side, there's a lot of marketing teams trying to build a product, say e-commerce or enterprise level website that needs to be built like a software tool. And they don't have the technical know-how and probably not a lot of the financial discipline maybe that a CFO would have. So maybe there's a magic 3 of the CMO, director of product, and some sort of financial input. I think that's the triad that needs to come up with the content. And then when it comes to storytelling, I think this is when you kind of get into design, right? And how do we tell this story simply? What's the UI of our story? Again, StoryBrand's like a good book. It's fun. It walks you through. It's like this hero's journey, if you will. I don't want to make this too conceptual, but if you're not familiar with the hero's journey, it's a great framework to take any story, anything you're trying to tell, and you're who is the hero? And it's not you. It's probably your audience, right?
It's not your product either.
Right.
Yeah, and maybe that's it. It's whoever you're talking to is the hero, right? Here's the journey they're on. They're in part of the hero's journey. There's the refusal of the call, I think, is the part of the story. And Luke Skywalker comes and he doesn't want to go off this adventure, even though R2-D2 is there. And it's not until something tragic happens where he has to leave Tatooine. That's very common. Hey, you need to go on this adventure. We need your help, and they're no, I need to stick. I need to do. Or there's so many excuses not to move. It really requires that pain point. So expressing what that pain point is and why they're going on this journey, what challenges they're going to face. What is the reward? What's the chalice, I think they call it, at the end. And then ultimately you eventually become Obi-Wan, right? You go on to help somebody else. So I think that's another good framework to wrap your story around, but that's the concept, right? What it comes down to is this content really compelling? Is it designed well? And have you done your homework so that everything you say you can back up with facts?
Yeah, hero's journey, and I just want to shout out if you've heard that concept but haven't taken a deep dive into the hero myth and the hero's journey, the book is Joseph Campbell's The Power of Myth. And it walks you through. Joseph Campbell was a philosopher and psychologist who studied this whole historical hero's journey that exists through all of literature, and it is a really powerful concept to grasp if you want to become amazing at storytelling, really thinking about the arc that Jason's talking about here.
Yeah, and you don't have to hit people over the head. That's just kind of like the slides.
Yeah.
You know, you create these empty slides and like, here's what we're trying to do. Here's what we're expressing. Like, here it is. People don't even know what's happening, right? And I think a really good storytellers, really good speakers, they do it intuitively, right? They just grew up intuitively doing it. And for people who aren't used to speaking or creating these decks, it takes time, right? You got to do this multiple times and you got to fail, just like product development. Like you have to put out some proof of concepts and realize like, oh, we need to pivot here. So, I mean, I can't think of a better skill than visual storytelling or written storytelling or verbal storytelling, regardless of who your career is. Because most of our jobs are to convince other people to make good ideas, take good actions. In the end of the day, isn't that what we're doing? I mean, there's a few out there that are like, no, I type code, I create prompts, right? But most of us are not practitioners. Most of us are like, how do we get people to make the choices that we want them to make? And everybody's canvas is different.
That's fair. So if you're out there on Zoom, feel free to pop your virtual hand in the air. There is at the bottom of your screen, there should be, if you're on the current version, there should be a little raise hand icon. And Anna, you can also just tap me on the shoulder.
I have a question. You mentioned that the journey map, like you've never seen a good one, or most of the journey maps you see are pretty bad. What is it that makes a really good journey map?
All right, great question. I also should say that we are biased because the people who hire us don't have the capacity to do what we do. So the people who are excellent at this aren't showing us their tools. So I have a selection bias. Is that what it's called? I think there's been a common theme of everything I talk about. Like, first off, it tells a very clear story. I think there is some degree of visual nature of it. I think it is simple. It's put into bullet points, and people can find, I think, a good matrix, so people can find that row that they're most interested in. And everybody shops differently. You're either going to shop, let's say you're on Amazon, you're going to shop through visual appeal or some sort of technical or financial appeal, right? I think a good journey map takes you through this. And I think a well-designed journey map is somewhat of a matrix, right? And you're going to have columns and rows. The columns are typically the stages. So then you get into these rows, and people aren't going to take it all in. No, they're going to zero in on what matters to them most, right? So I think, at the bottom of the map, these are your KPIs, metrics, expectations, like anything numeric, right? Like, how does this track back to some sort of number, right? And up top is a little bit more aspirational, like, what are these motivators and goals? Not just for the hero in the story, but also like who's funding the hero, right? Like what are our goals as a company and what are our customer goals at this stage? And if it's not singular in mission, you really dilute the message. So there's some degree of simplicity and just willingness to say, like, if we're not successful in everything else, if we're successful here, we will be successful as a product or as a company. So again, I think it's built for multiple audiences. That's why I love this idea of like printing it out. It's like 6 feet tall and 8 feet wide, or what is that thing called, the big ass calendar that everybody's obsessing about right now? You guys know this?
I haven't seen this.
All right, it's like a Jesse Itzler thing, and it's like a wall-shaped calendar, and it's the full year. Okay. You do it. Everybody who has one evangelizes it about it, right? They're like, this is amazing. It's game-changing because it's this massive visual thing. I'm sorry if it's not called Big Ass Calendar, but it's something like that. And I think it's just so front and center and big. And yeah, and I guess the problem is now that we're mostly remote first, you get all this stuff typically in a PDF or a Google slide or a PowerPoint deck. You just lose the resolution. And that's one of the downsides of being remote first environments is you lose the gravity of what you're trying to accomplish. So I can't change that dynamic for a lot of companies, but you guys can create something that articulates it as simple as possible. And think of the journey map just like you would your product user interface. You don't show all the features and functionality at once. You got to click in. You got to explore more. So I think that's a good thing to explore.
Just one thing on the tool that you're mentioning, with a new tool online like Miro, for instance, that has definitely, in my opinion, revolutionized how teams work together to see a bigger picture than you could see just on a PowerPoint slide in the past, right? We were presenting with just that narrow view, and now you can zoom in, zoom out, and really have, an end-to-end processes and, like this journey mapping to actually just focus on one area. And
oh yeah, great suggestion. I guarantee Miro and FigJam and Visio probably all have journey mapping baked in templates. So yeah, meet your team where they are. I love the idea of like zooming in and zooming out, having expansions and doing that. So people, there's like the elevator speech. Like people should get a concept in like 15 to 30 seconds.
Yeah.
People who want to spend 7 hours should also have that opportunity.
I was in a conversation yesterday working with a bunch of startups, and they were talking about their value proposition. And if your value proposition statement is more than the assertion was, if your value prop statement is more than a sentence, then you're not focused enough.
Right.
And just being able to convey that true value proposition in a single punch, as Devin might say, in a finger punch, that would be that's a really powerful story to tell really concisely.
Yeah. Use an LLM to narrow that down for you. Dump everything you think you know about your product and ask it to get you out those ideas.
brilliant.
It's like, I think one of the biggest benefits for me in a tool like ChatGPT is like, it didn't be very verbose. And I'm like, I can instruct it to narrow my ideas down into a character count, So when I'm thinking about like pitch decks or websites or anything like that, they're like, someone can tell this better. And unfortunately, robots are somehow better at narrowing down concepts than we are. So yeah, that one sentence, and it's hard. All of this is hard. It's hard work. And most people don't see all that goes into this experience, right? Unfortunately. And I know a lot of people, if you're here this morning, chances are you're one of those people that are putting a lot of work to convince other people to make good choices, right? It's a big part of our job, and you guys are probably the most assertive people out there at it. And this industry still fairly new.
Yeah.
Like product management as a role is relatively new.
Roughly, yeah. Some would argue it's as old as the 50s for the brand managers, but real product management as we think of it today, 20, 25 years. So,
and then just those best practices, and they're evolving. So I love what you've built here. And it really wasn't until I went to Product Camp, here's a pitch for Product Camp, that I realized how much this community wanted to help each other. It's super endearing. Like, I would assume most people, I guess, on this call have been to Product Camp or know about it. But like, I was kind of overwhelmed at this idea of like group connection and wanting to like solve a more global problem of product, right? So, and also to me, that's a product of Atlanta. I think Atlanta's a rising tide raises all ship type city.
We are a community-driven city. We really are. If you look around Atlanta, I think there are a few other cities that have that mentality, and product people, the product career, because for those of us who have been in it for more than 10 or 15 years, we were literally inventing the practices together. We were designing what this career looked like as we went, trying to solve problems that our businesses asked us to solve, and no one could do it on their own. Even Marty Kagan, who is considered kind of the godfather of product management these days, if you look at what he does with Silicon Valley Product Group, is they go around and study what the best do, and then they just try to say, here's what we learned over here, and here's what we learned over here, and here's what we learned over here. These are the practices that people have invented to deliver great products. So it is a community-driven career and in a community-driven city, and so yeah, we're big on community. Thanks for noticing that, Jay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very front and center, and almost all the topics I brought up when I was looking through Product Coffee, I've seen references to all of them. So clearly the resources and connections are there. But it takes time to do this and do this right. Unfortunately, people are all fighting different battles within their own organizations. Very different. It could be personality, it could be financial, it could be time, it could be product market fit. But I think there's enough commonality that I think this community can help elevate this city.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing this with us today, Jason, and thanks for pivoting in and jumping on the First Cup panel as well. I see Manesh has his hand in the air. Let's bring Manesh forward. He has a question.
Hey, thank you, Jason. Jason Rhodes, we've worked with you before, back in 2019, for UX and all that fun stuff. My question's around B2B and dealing with stuff like accounting and AR and all these really boring topics that we're trying to build solutions around. How would your expedition be different if in any way, approached when you're dealing with the B2Bs and the boring topics that we have to now learn the specialties within that scope?
Oh, great question. I should say a vast majority of who we work with is B2B. You listed some big global brands, but often we're actually working on B2B admin systems and finances. So I guess the simple answer is it doesn't change much, but I will say that this whole concept of B2C versus B2B audiences, like the needs and desires and expectations are colliding together. Just people aren't extracting themselves from, they're no longer okay with their B2B digital experiences being vastly different from a user experience than their, did I say B2B before? Than their B2C. You get what I'm saying. So I don't think the process changes, but I think what does change, especially in the UX world, is in B2B, you're typically trying to solve pretty complex workflows, right?
Right.
And
right.
And then it really gets hyper detailed. And there's only so much jobs to be done that will help illustrate how to solve that. So I guess first off, I think what jobs to be done, it really narrows the scope of like, what are they actually trying to accomplish? And sometimes it's multiple things, unfortunately, in the B2B world at the same time. And then there's these workflows that become increasingly more complex as you deal with like accounting software and fintech and IT, right? So I think that's what gets you outside of this 99-day expedition, right? A prototype would certainly help, but you get into this iterative process of prototyping. Did we solve the UX? Is it actually helping them solve their goals? The only thing I might add on to that is this whole concept of maybe how we visualize the result of the B2B software. I think a lot of companies forget that they are not showcasing the value of the product. Most B2B software is quite frankly glorified spreadsheets, right? These are tables and rows with actions upon them. And most B2B software not only looks outdated from a UI perspective, it doesn't really showcase the value to the customer of what's happening behind the scenes because they're seeing the tip of the iceberg, like what's happening on their behalf. And this is typically done through whatever, data visualizations or dashboard or actionable insights or whatever that looks like. So I'm not sure if that changes the process or answers your questions, but I would say the things we typically focus on when it comes to UX in those areas is like, number one, is this workflow functional? Are we focused on the right things? Is this actually the goals that they have that will provide value to them as a customer? And then, lastly, how are we iterating on creating these prototypes that will demonstrate like, yes, this speeds up my workflow. This is definitely better. And again, I'm biased. Like the more you're doing this through, say, a Figma prototype versus having developers work on this, prior to that, it's just more time and money that's going to be saved. So I think that's probably the biggest complication that I typically see are these like dynamic things. But yeah, to get people out of this glorified spreadsheet mentality and get into that abstraction layer that came up before, this like UX for AI, we've been abstracting products for a long time. Because products in the beginning, let's say late 90s, 2000s, they were just a reflection of the database. This is a MySQL database, and you go to the product, and it just looks a little bit better, right? So that was stage one, right? Let's get this to that. And then we're like, let's get it to the cloud, and let's get it to unstructured databases. And then at some point, you're like, wait, this isn't how people think. This is not how people work. How do we abstract that? And you just can't do that with, in my opinion, in a developer-first approach. It has to be this outside-in approach. It has to be a design and iterative design approach.
And then to all my community on this call or anywhere else that's listening, if we have any contacts at Concur or Travel Inc., if we could connect Jason Rhodes to them, I really appreciate them improving their UI.
Oh man,
because it's a painstaking challenge to get my flights booked and everything else.
When I was at IBM, we were launching IBM Design Thinking and doing a lot of work with that. And every single workshop that we did to teach design thinking skills, the sample project that everyone worked on was improving the travel booking experience.
Oh, really? I would start with government.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. That's the I think every school out there, every HCI program should all start with government processes. Like, that's not a reference to Doge or anything like that. That's a reference just to, like, it's so nerve-wracking to like update anything on most government websites. Like, I understand like the B2C, the appeal of working on B2C, but
just as a user, as you said, currently unemployed between jobs, and I'm actually using, those tools provided by the government, for the unemployment insurance,
Oh God, they're awful.
Medicaid, some of those, which is utterly confusing. It's really hard for people to actually get, the need that the right help that they need. Trying to understand how to use those tools and why they keep on, redirecting you to yet another website. And it's like, so which one should I use? This one or that one? It's really difficult.
yeah. And that's probably a product of, sorry, I don't want to deviate from this conversation, but some product life cycles and teams, they're forced into a process that some of these designs might have been created 7 years before they were released to market. So it could just be some certain industries lag, as we've seen.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get into that a lot next week, as we specifically some of the things we're talking about right now. I think they're a direct function of essentially what are funded and delivered as IT projects to solve a management problem, not to solve a customer problem, not to solve a market problem. And that shift in bringing product thinking to IT and how that helps deliver better outcomes and better experiences overall, I think is going to be a big part of next week's conversation as well. So, and we've got a packed team for that one as well. So it's going to be a really good week. We are at the top of the hour. So Jason, I want to thank you again.
This was fun.
Glad you could be here in the studio with us, folks. We didn't get to introductions earlier today, but we'll be back on those next week. So please join us again next week. We'll be here at 11:30 Eastern Daylight Time now, because we're back on the daylight time. And we'll see you back here at Product Coffee. If you're looking for some more Product Coffee in the meantime, we have got the book club coming up this Friday. I think we're covering chapter 3. Is that right? Is that right,
Is that
Manish?
2?
I believe that's correct, Jason.
All right. Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah, chapter
Yeah.
I don't
3.
know if
So
Manish is still here.
head over to productcoffee.com/book club. We're reading Aligned by Bruce McCarthy and Melissa Appel. And they're also very active in our community. And we'll be doing an author's chat with them towards the end of the reading as well. Again, so jump over to productcoffee.com/book club. Sign up for that. We'll drop the invitation right on your calendar. And we will see you next week. Thanks for everybody for coming. Have a great week. Bye.
I-
Thanks, everyone.